The sound of an explosion halts a soccer game in Paris as a series of bombings and shootings begin in the city. Good evening. Scores of people have been killed in the attacks which took place at restaurants and a concert hall where hostages were taken. Police moved in on that hall and killed some of the attackers. A California-based rock band was set to play there tonight. Members of the Eagles of Death metal posted on social media that they are all right. The French government closed its borders and declared a state of emergency. President Obama is vowing to do whatever it takes to bring the attackers to justice. Today's attacks recall the violence at a French magazine earlier this year when a dozen people were killed. San Diegans responded then with a gathering at the House of France in Balboa Park. KPBS reporter Andrew Bowen says another is planned.
Well, people will be gathering here at the French House in Balboa Park Saturday evening. A group of French expats is organizing a prayer vigil, and it's the same group of people who held the ceremony here after the attacks on the Charlie Hebdo magazine in January. And you can go to kpbs.org for the latest information on the event. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
San Diego attorney Colin Parent is vacationing in Paris, staying in an apartment just about a mile from the restaurant attacked tonight. He told KPBS he has heard sirens and has seen some emergency vehicles.
I can, look out at a otherwise busy street and see that there aren't nearly as many people walking around as were the prior few nights that I was here.
Parent says security was already tight in Paris even before the attacks.
You go into these places and there's these guys with, machine guns guarding museums. There's a lot of that's normal here in Europe that, is pretty unusual for Americans.
PBS NewsHour will have the latest on the attacks in Paris tonight at 7 here on KPBS. We are also following social media posts from San Diegans in Paris on our website, kpbs.org. The Pentagon says it's reasonably certain that a U.S. drone strike in Syria killed the Islamic State militant known as Jihadi John. He is believed to be the man who murdered 2 American journalists on video last year, but their families say it's too little, too late. They say the U.S. should have spent as much effort to find hostages held by ISIS. A tsunami advisory has been issued after a magnitude 7 earthquake hit southwest Japan. Forecasters there say tsunamis of up to 3 feet could hit the coast of Kagoshima and Prefecture on Kyushu and small islands to the south. California Governor Jerry Brown is extending his executive order to conserve water. The state is preparing for a 5th year of drought, even as it gets ready for potential storms from El Nino. Water officials say they won't know the state of the drought until later in the rainy season. Today's order allows emergency conservation measures to stay in place through October of next year. Residents who live under the flight path of planes departing from Lindbergh Field are used to living with the noise. They're supposed to get relief overnight. But reporter Chris Young with KPBS media partner iNewsSource reports that airlines sometimes break the curfew, and when they do, their violations often go unpunished.
Airplanes leaving San Diego International Airport have to take off before 11:30 p.m. Otherwise, airlines face fines for violating a curfew meant to keep the skies quiet at night. An iNewsSource analysis of data from the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority found that airlines have broken curfew a total of 217 times since 2010. JetBlue Airways has violated the curfew more than any other airline. Since 2010, its planes have taken off late a total of 54 times. Delta Airlines is next, with 31 violations. United Airlines rounds out the top 3 violators, having broken curfew 19 times in the past 5 years. According to airport regulations, airlines that violate the curfew face fines ranging from $2,000 to $10,000, and sometimes more. But iNewsSource found that airlines are often not penalized for breaking curfew. Of the 217 violations since 2010, only 54% resulted in fines. The airlines guilty of violating curfew the most paid fines for fewer than half of their violations.
Joining me now is Chris Young, who reported this story for iNewsSource. Chris, what happens when an airline breaks the curfew?
Well, every curfew violation is reviewed by the airport authority's Curfew Violation Review Panel. The officials on the panel take a close look at each of the violations, and often they discuss them with the airline representatives to find out exactly why the flights took off so late.
So why do so many violations go unpenalized?
It's really a matter of balancing accountability and safety. In most cases, records show that the Curfew Review Panel excused airlines from paying fines because the late flights were the result of mechanical issues. One resident I spoke with said that airlines shouldn't get off the hook for paying a fine for maintenance issues because it's their responsibility to maintain their planes. But airport officials told me that they don't want an airline to decide to put off a mechanical fix to beat the curfew just because they don't want to pay the fine.
So we saw which airlines have violated the curfew the most. Are there any airlines that have not broken it?
That was actually interesting. Southwest Airlines had 0 violations in the past 5 years. There are a few reasons for that. For one thing, the airline doesn't operate a lot of these late-night red-eye flights that depart around the curfew. They also have a huge fleet in San Diego, so the airline can swap out planes if one of them is having a mechanical issue. But an airport official told me that Southwest also has a policy that they won't break the curfew, and the airline has even canceled flights to avoid doing so.
And we have more of your reporting online at kpbs.org. I'm News Source reporter Chris Young. A new report says the Brigantine should replace Anthony's Fish Grotto on San Diego's downtown waterfront. Anthony's has been on the waterfront for 46 years, but the restaurant's lease expires in January. The Port Commission staff says Anthony's should be replaced with a new 2-level portside pier complex. It would have several restaurants, an expanded dock and dine space, and a public viewing deck. Anthony's and another developer also submitted proposals, but the port staff says those plans wouldn't bring in as much rent. All the plans go before the Port Commission on Tuesday. A forum in San Diego today explored what effect sugary drinks have on health. Kenny Goldberg takes a closer look at the issue.
Research shows 1 in 4 adults drink at least 1 sugary drink a day. And each 20-ounce soda contains 16 teaspoons of sugar and 240 calories. Here to talk about the health effects of all of this added sugar is Dr. Harold Goldstein, Executive Director of the California Center for Public Health Advocacy. Harold, what is the connection between sugary drinks and conditions like type 2 diabetes and obesity?
You know, Kenny, it's a direct connection. There's now overwhelming evidence showing that the consumption of all of this sugar and soda and sports drinks and energy drinks, vitamin water, that all of that sugar gets absorbed very quickly in the body, that over time it wears out the pancreas on the one side, and it turns to fat in the liver. And this combination of worn out pancreas and fatty liver leads directly to diabetes.
Now, the beverage industry says type 2 diabetes and obesity are very complex problems, and it's unfair to blame their products for these health conditions. What do you say to that?
You know, I say it's true. A lot of these problems, most problems in our society are complex. Absolutely, we have a responsibility to do what we can to make a difference and to focus on the biggest culprits. The latest research shows that half of the obesity epidemic has been caused strictly by all these sugary beverages. Compared to 30 years ago, people are consuming 120 more calories per day just from these sugary beverages. That's twice as much. Portion sizes have gotten a lot bigger. They're advertised everywhere. It used to be you go to a restaurant and you'd get a 12-ounce glass, mostly with ice, right? Now you go to a fast food restaurant and you get a refillable 32-ounce cup.
Now, the beverage industry says they don't advertise their products as health foods, and all the ingredients are listed on the labels. So what's the big deal?
You know, the big deal is that most people know that drinking this stuff isn't like eating broccoli. But I don't think most people realize that when you consume all of this liquid sugar, that it is leading directly to fatty liver disease, and that kids who drink this are significantly more likely to be obese and more likely to have diabetes later in life. Right now in the United States, almost a quarter of teenagers have either diabetes or prediabetes. That's astounding. A quarter of teenagers now have diabetes or prediabetes, and 2/3 of them drink a sugary drink or more a day. That's the equivalent of sticking 16 teaspoons of sugar directly into their veins, and we now see the results, direct results of all of that sugar consumption.
Now, one way of reducing consumption, it's been suggested, is to raise taxes on sodas and other sugary drinks. Berkeley has done that, and so has the country of Mexico. What can you tell us about the results from these taxes?
You know, what we're seeing from these taxes is that they work, and they work in two different ways. They raise the price, and they therefore lower consumption some. And I think even more importantly, they raise a significant amount of money to mitigate, to start solving the problems that these products cause. Take a tax on sugary beverages and using it like they're going to be doing in Berkeley to have healthy food programs in schools or more physical activity. Physical activity, we've got to have our kids burning off all these calories that they're consuming from the sugary drinks. It makes a lot of sense to me that we tax those products and use the money. It's, in some ways, it's like a gasoline tax, say. Gasoline tax isn't telling people don't use gasoline. Gasoline tax is used to fix the roads, because when you use the roads, by buying gasoline and driving your car, some things has to fix it, and there needs to be a funding source to fix it. Let's do the same with sugary beverages.
And what's the possibility that these taxes, lastly, could spread in California or other places in the country?
Yeah, Kenny, it's a really good question. I think we are at the very beginning of a worldwide movement where there are going to be more and more of these taxes. The beverage industry likes to say that most places aren't like Berkeley, but what we know is that Berkeley has started a lot of worldwide movements. The free speech movement started in Berkeley. I can guarantee you there are going to be a lot more places in California and across the country that are going to be doing these sugary drink taxes.
Well, Harold Goldstein, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
We want to correct ourselves on that story. We told you a few minutes ago about Anthony's Fish Grotto. The restaurant has been on the waterfront since 1946, and its lease ends in January 2017. Moving on to another longtime dining landmark. After 57 years in business, Albi's Beef Inn will stop serving martinis and prime rib at the end of December. The owner can't afford the rent requested by new landlords. KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone and video journalist Katie Shulov visit the Mission Valley Piano Bar and Steakhouse, famous for its nude paintings.
Friday nights at Albi's Beef Inn are busier than ever. Not what you would expect for a restaurant on the verge of shutting down.
Yeah, I tell you, if you want to get busy, I guess announce that a landmark restaurant's going to close and you get really busy.
Friday is packed. And people are off work, they want to party, so we just let it all hang out.
I get a kick out of you.
David Timothy Smith has been playing at Albi's for 18 years.
I get a kick every time I see you.
He's stuck around because he says the crowd is so welcoming.
I don't know any other way to describe it. It's warm. It's when I sit down here at the piano, I don't really feel like I'm on stage, so to speak, but more like this is my little table, and I'm conversing with all the rest of the people at their little tables.
I've got you under my skin.
Most nights, patrons join Smith at the piano.
One of the best singers I've ever heard. His name is Cedric Peary.
You all be sure to come on back here real soon now, you know, and want to get it all in.
Albi's looks exactly like it did 27 years ago when Ted Samoris' family bought the restaurant.
It's an old school steak and seafood house with the piano bar, with the dark paneling and the dim lighting and the original oil nudies that were done for the restaurant. It's kind of a boozy hangout.
Even more than the song and the stiff drinks, Albies owes its reputation to the nude paintings on its walls. Stories have circulated over the years about where they came from. Turns out they were commissioned for the restaurant from a local painter named Larry Vincent Garrison. He signed his paintings Vincent.
And Larry did hang out in here and have a few cocktails. Larry tells me that there were 5 PSA stewardesses that posed for him at the time. I want to say it was in the very early 70s, with the exception of the gal that sits on the right hand of the piano bar, which was Larry's third ex-wife.
Eugenia Hart Kinsell came to Albies to celebrate her 90th birthday. She's not the least bit offended by the nudes.
Oh, no, they're gorgeous, which is just fine. And I hear they are PSA stewardesses, which makes it especially, because after all, that was our local airline.
When Albies closes at the end of December, the paintings will go into storage.
I don't think my wife wants them all throughout our home.
New owners bought the land Albies sits on, which also includes the Travel Lodge and Albies' sister restaurant, Adam's Steak and Eggs. Samora says he can't afford the new rent.
Albies is closing not because we failed, we're not going out of business. It is simply the property has sold and the new owners have their own ideas going forward.
They did want Samoras to update the interior. Kathy Herrick of San Diego Historic Properties says she negotiated with Samoras for 8 months, hoping to come to an agreement. She even offered him lower rent for a year. But ultimately, the market rate, which would take effect in year 2, was too expensive for Samoras. For 27 years, Albies has been the home away from home for bartender Fred Grassley.
If you knew my wife, you know why I come to work.
A veteran bartender, he's quick with a joke and has heard his share of stories. Retirement was not on his mind.
I was not ready. I'm only 70 years old. I had a long ways to go.
Lounging above Grassley as he works is the largest nude portrait in the bar. It will be there on December 23rd when Grassley pours the last drink at this fabled San Diego spot. Angela Carone, KPBS
News. SeaWorld scraps the killer whale circus, but critics say it's not enough. The DA declines to charge a cop who shot an unarmed man to death. And airlines escape fines for taking off too late at Lindbergh Field. I'm Mark Sauer. Join us for the Roundtable tonight at 8:30 here on KPBS.
And tomorrow is a big day for San Diego Comic-Con fans. Badge sales begin online for next year's convention. This is for those who went to Comic-Con last year. Fans can go to the online waiting room starting at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and badge sales begin at 9. Comic-Con says it's made 2 changes to badges this year. They'll all have RFID chips, making them harder to counterfeit, and they'll be sent out by mail before the convention, meaning one less line to wait in. Diana Nyad first tried to swim from Cuba to Florida in 1978. She finally made the long-distance swim in 2013. She talks with Peggy Pico about her accomplishment and her new book.
At the age of 64 and on her 5th attempt, Diana Nyad became the first person to swim the 111 miles between Cuba and Key West without a shark cage. In her new memoir, Find a Way, Nyad reveals her life's journey, including her 53-hour swim in shark-infested waters. Diana Nyad, welcome to Evening Edition.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Now, you started doing marathon swims back in the 70s. What drew you to the sport?
You know, I think people are drawn to what they're good at. And so I had a knack for traveling across the surface of the ocean for hours and hours and hours at a pretty good speed. And then, the sport is one thing. The earth is 4/5 water. And I and a bunch of marathon swimmers swam across all those lakes, rivers, and oceans. But Cuba, what drew me to Cuba, that was the special thing. It was never just another swim. It wasn't Manhattan Island or the Bahamas. It was living life large. People had tried since 1950. It was the Mount Everest of the Earth's oceans. And to me, it was dreaming a magical star that would take every ounce of who I am to try to make it across.
You did this, though, at the age when a lot of people are retiring.
Yeah.
So why particularly at that age? Was there something that happened that you said, oh, man, I got to do this now?
I think just reaching 60, I just went into, my mama just died, and I just kind of went into a life reckoning, as a lot of people do. The end is actually in sight. And even though I'm a vital, young 66 today, it doesn't matter. Just count the years. My mom died at 82. Does that mean I have that few years to live? And I just decided if there aren't that many years to live, I'm going to live them, you know, with gusto, with full throttle. And what's going to make me have to dig down like that? My old dream, Cuba, that I had tried when I was 28 and didn't make. And I thought, I'm going to go back and chase that dream.
You
I'm
tried
gonna be
4 times.
Fully alert. I have tried quite a bit. So, yeah, it's a wild, vast wilderness out there. There's a lot of Mother Nature happening. So I did. I tried 4 times before the 5th magical one came.
Now, when you emerged from the ocean onto the beach at Key West, you had 3 messages. Here's what you said that day in 2013.
I got 3 messages. One is, we should never, ever give up. Okay. 2 is, you're never too old to chase your dreams. That's right. Amen, sister. 3 is, it looks like a solitary sport, but it's a team.
So never give up. You're never too old, and it's not a solitary sport. Why those 3 messages after this long journey?
You, Peggy, after all this training, always I had kind of an ego, like, what will I say? What will be the oration when I finally reach that store? But it didn't work out that way. I never thought of those things. They just came out, but they were the authentic messages that I carried with me in questing after this.
Speaking of authentic, your book reveals some sexual abuse from your father and by a swim coach. What effect did that have on your life's decisions?
You know, it's a dichotomy. In some ways deep. You know, you can only be the person you are. I didn't suffer through the Holocaust, and I don't compare myself to people who have suffered much more than I have, believe me. On the other hand, it's my life, and I have to just speak of and experience what I experienced. So that sexual abuse has run deep. It's an imprint, even though I'm a pretty darn happy, together, successful person. But I can't deny that little hurt girl is still in there somewhere. So I think it is a deep imprint, and that's the reason I talk about it, so that other little kids can say, you know what, I'm at least going to speak up when this happens rather than stay silent all the time.
Now, photos in your book include a painful-looking aftermath of your run-in with a jellyfish. What kind of toll did this 53 hours of swimming have on your body? Well,
that particular run-in, it's the box jellyfish. There are thousands of species of jellyfish. None of them are pleasant, but that one you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. That's life or death. And I would say at that moment, being stung in 2011 all over, a swarm of jellyfish, I could have died that night. So, you know, that was the ultimate in sort of the hardship of the swim. The rest of it is, you know, hallucinations and hypothermia and joy and awe. You know, it's an extreme world out there, and in some ways I'm going to miss it.
Well, quite a book you've written about it, and people can read all about it. Marathon swimmer and author Diana Nyad, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
I'm Gwen Eichel. On the next News Hour, investigative journalism on the silver screen. A look at the new film Spotlight. That's Friday on the PBS NewsHour.
And now for the Shakespeare starred. The Old Globe's cast of Much Ado About Nothing will perform across the city this weekend for audiences who don't ordinarily get to see a Shakespeare play.
You know, the Old Globe is a public institution. We receive public funding, we stand in a public park, we work on Shakespeare, which are works in the public trust, and we feel an obligation to serve the public. And we know that around San Diego there are many, many people who, for whatever reason, can't get to Balboa Park to see one of our shows. So we've decided that we would come out to them.
Much Ado About Nothing is one of Shakespeare's most beloved comedies, featuring the witty couple Beatrice and Benedict and their merry war of a romance. The performances are scheduled for Malcolm X Public Library on Saturday and the Central Branch of the San Diego Public Library and the Jacobs Center for Neighborhood Innovation on Sunday. Mama's Kitchen's annual holiday pie sale helps to provide more than 32,000 meals to people suffering from HIV, AIDS, and cancer. This year, organizers say they'll sell more than 4,600 pies. Each pie sale equals 7 meals for hungry and sick people in San Diego County. Executive Director of Mama's Kitchen, Alberto Cortez, says it is the people of San Diego that makes the holiday pie sale such a success.
We do our work because it's a community effort, and that's the only way it can happen.
No need to worry about your waistline. You don't have to eat a pie to buy one. Mama's Kitchen will send a pie on your behalf to one of their customers along with a holiday meal. Go to mamaspies.org for more information. Starting to feel more like autumn in San Diego, 70s and 60s on the coast with possible rain on Sunday. Also 70s and 60s in the inland valleys, a bit cooler on the mountains, hitting the 50s and 40s and 70s in the desert. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.